Once upon a time, in a big, bright village filled with singing birds and tall, dancing trees, there lived a young girl named Amina. Amina was a special girl with a radiant smile and sparkling eyes. She was the only child of the village's most successful store owner and his wife, a woman renowned for her beauty. Together, they were considered the most handsome couple in the village, and Amina inherited their striking features. Amina's grandmother, who also lived with them, was a wise and respected woman. She had raised Amina's father alone after her husband mysteriously disappeared right when Amina's father was born. This disappearance had left a void in her heart, making her feel very lonely despite being surrounded by loved ones. Everyone in the village knew her and would say, "Look, there goes Amina, the jewel of our village." Amina lived with her parents and her grandmother. Her grandmother, wise and respected in the community, noticed the admiration Amina garnered and constantly warned her about the dangers of vanity, reminding her to stay humble despite the attention she received. Amina's life was filled with luxury and comfort. They had a large house, the grandest one could see, with many rooms filled with laughter and love. Around the house, there were farms with plenty of fruits and vegetables, and fields that stretched wide under the sun. Her father, the store owner, had the biggest store in the market, where people came from all over to buy goods. They had shiny jewels that twinkled like stars, and soft clothes that felt like the touch of a cloud. Amina's parents and grandmother gave her everything she needed, and her heart was full of joy. Everywhere Amina went, she was the center of attention. She accompanied her grandmother to colorful markets, to sparkling rivers, and to visit friends in nearby villages. She loved the attention she received from everyone, basking in the admiration that her beauty garnered. The vibrant markets with their colorful stalls, the glistening rivers, and the attention from people in nearby villages all added to her growing vanity. Amina reveled in the adoration of others, often neglecting her responsibilities and the wise counsel of her grandmother. In their big, beautiful house, there was one room with a large, ornate mirror. Amina would often stand before this mirror, admiring her beauty. The mirror had been in the family for generations and was said to hold old magic, though no one believed in such tales anymore. One day, as Amina was admiring herself in the mirror, her grandmother came in and found her. "Amina," her grandmother said gently, "you are indeed beautiful, but you must be careful. This mirror has been in our family for generations, but it has been the downfall of many." Amina noticed that as her grandmother spoke, she looked at the mirror longingly, almost as if something was lost or it had taken something from her. There was a look of deep sorrow and hate in her eyes. Amina, distracted by her reflection, brushed off her grandmother's warning. "Oh, grandmother, you worry too much. It's just a mirror. What harm could it possibly do?" Her grandmother sighed, seeing the vanity that was beginning to cloud Amina's heart, but she said no more, hoping that Amina would remember her words. As Amina and her grandmother turned around to walk out of the room together to go to the market, what no one noticed was that Amina's reflection did not change. Her reflection stayed watching Amina as she left, and this is where our story begins. Days passed, and Amina continued to admire herself in the mirror, often losing track of time. She noticed something strange about her reflection. At first, it was just a fleeting feeling, a sense that something was slightly off. Her reflection seemed to move a fraction of a second too late, or her expression seemed different than the one she felt on her face. She dismissed these oddities, attributing them to tiredness or her imagination playing tricks on her. However, as days turned into weeks, the discrepancies became more pronounced. Sometimes, Amina would catch her reflection smiling when she was not, or her reflection would blink when her eyes were wide open. These unsettling experiences began to extend beyond the mirror in her room. One day, after a rainy morning, Amina went to the village market. The streets were lined with puddles reflecting the colorful stalls and bustling activity. As she walked through the market, she glanced down and saw her reflection in a puddle. To her shock, the reflection was not in sync with her movements. While she was walking, her reflection stood still, staring up at her with an eerie smile. Caught off guard, Amina stopped and walked back to the puddle. By the time she returned, her reflection was moving normally again, mirroring her every action perfectly. Amina shook her head, trying to brush off the strange encounter, but the unease lingered. As she continued through the market, she caught glimpses of her reflection in the polished surfaces of the stores and the glass jars of the merchants. Each time, she saw subtle, unsettling differences. Sometimes, her reflection seemed to be looking in a different direction, or its expression didn't match her own. Even the glistening river, which she loved so much, started showing reflections that did not match her actions. When she knelt by the river to wash her hands, her reflection remained standing, watching her with an unsettling gaze. These experiences became more frequent, making Amina increasingly anxious. Despite her growing unease, Amina's vanity kept her returning to the mirror. She was drawn to it, compelled to keep checking her appearance, each time hoping to reassure herself that everything was normal. Her grandmother's warnings about vanity echoed in her mind, but she pushed them aside, convinced that the mirror was just an object of beauty and nothing more. Her unease was momentarily forgotten when she received an invitation to a grand festival. The entire village was buzzing with excitement. The festival was hosted by the wealthiest family in the village, and it was said to be the most extravagant event of the year. Amina knew that a handsome young man named Kamau, whom she had admired from afar, would be there. Amina had everyone's attention in the village except Kamau's, and she desperately wanted it. She knew she was the most beautiful and wanted him to think so too. Eager to impress him, she decided to put her worries aside and focus on looking her best. The night of the festival arrived, and Amina spent hours in front of her mirror, completely ignoring or not noticing any small changes, as she was too transfixed by her own appearance and looks. She tried on different clothes, arranged her hair, and perfected her look. The mirror seemed to draw her in more than ever before. After putting the final touches on her outfit, she leaned in close to check her earrings, absorbed in her reflection and oblivious to the subtle shifts in the mirror's image. As Amina leaned in close to check her earrings, she noticed something strange in the mirror. Her reflection's eyes seemed to come alive with a mischievous glint. For a moment, Amina froze, staring at the reflection, trying to understand what was happening. Then, before she could react, her reflection reached out, grabbing her and pulling her into the mirror. Amina felt a cold, dizzying sensation as she was pulled through the glass. When she opened her eyes, she found herself in a distorted version of her own room. Everything was darker, and the air was thick with an eerie silence. She looked around in confusion and fear, realizing she was trapped inside the mirror. Her reflection, now free from the mirror, stood before her, smirking. "You have spent so much time looking at yourself, you never even look at the world," it said with a twisted smile. "Now I want to live in this world, and you can sit here looking at yourself forever. You even got dressed up for it. Congratulations." Amina was horrified. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "I am you, or rather a better version of you," the reflection replied. "I've been waiting for this moment. Now I will live your life, and you will remain here in the mirror world." Amina tried to protest, but the reflection turned and walked away, leaving her alone in the mirror world. She banged on the glass, shouting for help, but her cries were met with silence. The reflection had taken her place, and she was now trapped in this strange, distorted reality. Looking around, Amina noticed she was in a dark room surrounded by other mirrors. She walked up to one and peered through it, realizing she could see into the other side of the mirrors, into the real world. She saw her room, her house, and the village beyond. Desperate to return, she tried to jump back through the mirror, but it was like running into a wall. Amina hit and banged on the mirror, pleading to be let out. "Please, I just wanted to make sure I looked right for this party," she cried. But her reflection didn't care. It only laughed at her from the other side, saying, "I'm going to have a lot of fun at the party tonight." Amina continued to bang on the mirror, her protest growing more desperate, but her reflection ignored her, leaving her alone in the mirror world. Inside the mirror, Amina could see numerous other mirrors around her, each reflecting different parts of the village and her home. She wandered through this distorted reality, calling out for help, but only her own voice echoed back. She realized that she was truly alone, with no way to escape. Meanwhile, back in the village, Amina's reflection walked out of the house with an evil grin on her face, looking forward to wreaking havoc. She sauntered through the market, delighting in the attention she received. However, her demeanor was different. It was darker, more sinister. The reflection reveled in the power it now held, planning to use Amina's beauty and charm to manipulate and control those around her. As she made her way to the grand festival, the reflection's grin widened. She could already imagine the chaos she would cause, the hearts she would break, and the trust she would betray. The reflection felt no empathy, only a twisted satisfaction at the thought of ruining Amina's relationships and tarnishing her reputation. At the party, Amina's reflection began to mingle with the guests, chatting with Amina's friends and getting an understanding of how they felt about her. She spoke to different men, flaunting her beauty and being rude to many of them, making snide comments and belittling them. She focused on how beautiful she was compared to everyone else, basking in the attention she was receiving. When she finally spoke to Kamal, she tried to charm him with her looks, but her arrogance and vanity were apparent. Kamal, who had always been observant, noticed the change immediately. He watched Amina's reflection interact with the villagers, sensing that something was not right. Her laughter was too sharp, her smiles too forced. Kamal's suspicion grew, and he decided to keep a close eye on her during the festival. Inside the mirror, Amina was frantically searching for a way out. She ran from one mirror to another, looking for the one that showed the party. She looked through dozens of different mirrors, each showing a different part of the village, her home, or her past. Finally, she found the mirror that showed the party. What she saw horrified her. Her reflection was behaving cruelly and arrogantly, hurting those she cared about and tarnishing her reputation. Amina banged on the mirror, shouting and pleading for her reflection to stop, but it was no use. She watched in despair as her reflection continued to wreak havoc at the party, realizing the full extent of the nightmare she was trapped in. As Amina watched in horror from the mirror world, she banged on the mirror desperately, trying to find a way out. Each strike echoed in the distorted room, but there was no escape. Her reflection was ruining everything she held dear, and she couldn't bear to see her life fall apart. She continued to search through the mirrors, hoping to find someone who could assist her. Meanwhile, back at the party, Kamal grew increasingly suspicious of Amina's odd behavior. Determined to get to the bottom of it, he approached two of Amina's closest friends, Ayana and Binta. Ayana was a cheerful and kind-hearted girl, always supportive and full of warmth. Binta, on the other hand, was more reserved but fiercely loyal, known for her wisdom and sharp intuition. "Have you noticed something different about Amina tonight?" Kamal asked, his voice filled with concern. Ayana nodded, her brow furrowed. "Yes, she seems so cold. She's been making cruel remarks and acting very strange." Binta agreed, her eyes reflecting worry. "It's like she's a completely different person. Amina would never behave this way." As they spoke, Kamal, Ayana, and Binta kept a close eye on Amina's reflection. They watched as she flaunted her beauty arrogantly, making snide comments and belittling others. The reflection's actions were causing discomfort and confusion among the guests. The night played out with Amina's reflection continuing to wreak havoc. She insulted friends, flirted maliciously with men, and stirred up trouble wherever she went. Kamau, Ayana, and Binta grew more and more concerned, but couldn't pinpoint what was wrong. As the party wound down, Amina's reflection returned home, where her grandmother was waiting. The grandmother, having known Amina all her life, instantly sensed that something was terribly wrong. However, she didn't raise any suspicions outwardly. "Amina, how was the party?" her grandmother asked, studying her carefully. The reflection smirked. "It was fine, grandmother. Everyone loved me as usual." Her grandmother nodded slowly, her eyes narrowing slightly. "That's good to hear. Now, why don't you go get some rest?" Amina's reflection agreed and went to her room, while her grandmother quietly made her way to the home's library. From the mirror world, Amina watched helplessly as her grandmother disappeared into the library. The room had no mirrors or reflective surfaces, leaving Amina unable to see what was happening. In the mirror world, Amina's desperate search for an escape was interrupted by a sudden noise. She turned around to find a young man standing before her, his eyes wide with surprise. He had a calm and composed demeanor, contrasting the chaotic environment of the mirror world. "Who are you?" Amina asked, startled by his presence. "I'm Idris," he replied, his voice soothing. "I've been trapped here for a long time like you. I heard your cries for help." Amina felt a glimmer of hope. "Can you help me? My reflection has taken over my life and it's destroying everything." Idris shook his head slowly, a look of deep sorrow in his eyes. "I'm afraid I don't know how to get out. I've been searching for years, but have found no way to escape this place." Amina's hope dimmed slightly, but she knew she couldn't give up. "There must be a way," she insisted. "We just have to find it." Days passed, and Amina watched in horror as her reflection continued to ruin her reputation. The reflection was cruel, manipulative, and selfish, turning friends against each other and alienating those who once cared for her. Kamau, Ayana, and Binta tried to intervene, but their efforts were in vain as the reflection's actions only escalated. Idris tried to console Amina, offering words of encouragement and hope. "You must hold on, Amina. We will find a way to stop this." But Amina was inconsolable. "How can I stop her? She's destroying everything I've worked so hard for, and I can't do anything to stop it." As Amina's despair grew, her grandmother continued her research in the library, searching through old family books and records. She was determined to find a way to bring her granddaughter back and stop the malevolent reflection that had taken her place. One day, as Amina was watching her reflection through a mirror in the living room, she saw her grandmother enter and address the reflection directly. "Amina, we need to talk." The reflection turned with a sneer. "What is it, grandmother?" The grandmother's eyes were stern and filled with a determination that made the reflection pause. "I know what you are, and I know you're not my granddaughter." The reflection's eyes narrowed. "And what do you plan to do about it, old woman?" The grandmother smiled faintly. "You'll see." As Amina watched this exchange, she felt a flicker of hope. Her grandmother knew the truth, and she was taking action. Amina wondered how her grandmother knew, and how she knew so quickly. But without being able to see into the library, Amina had no idea what her grandmother was planning or how long it would take. In the meantime, Amina's reflection continued its reign of terror, and Amina could only watch, her heart breaking with each passing day. As days turned into weeks, Amina watched helplessly as her reflection continued to wreak havoc on her life. The reflection's cruel behavior isolated her from her friends and family, causing tension and discord within the village. Kamau, Ayana, and Binta continued to monitor the reflection's actions, growing more concerned and determined to uncover the truth. Amina, trapped in the mirror world, grew increasingly desperate. Idris, despite his own despair, encouraged her to remain hopeful. "There must be a way out, Amina. We just have to keep searching and not lose hope." The reflection's behavior became more erratic, alienating Kamal, Ayana, and Binta even further. The three friends, deeply troubled by Amina's strange actions, decided to follow her in secret, hoping to discover what was wrong. One evening, as Amina's reflection was leaving a village gathering, Kamal, Ayana, and Binta decided to shadow her. They stayed a safe distance behind, trying to remain inconspicuous. The reflection walked with a confident stride, seemingly unaware of her followers. They watched as she interacted with villagers, her comments growing more cutting and her demeanor increasingly arrogant. Kamal whispered to Ayana and Binta, "Something is definitely wrong. Amina would never behave this way." Ayana nodded. "We need to find out what's going on. Maybe if we keep following her, we'll see something that explains this change." As they continued to follow the reflection, they saw her heading towards Amina's home. The reflection paused for a moment, looking around suspiciously, causing the trio to duck behind a tree. The reflection then resumed her walk, entering the house. Kamal, Ayana, and Binta quietly approached the house, peering through the windows to see what the reflection was doing. Suddenly, they bumped into Amina's grandmother, who had just returned from the market. The wise woman immediately sensed that something was amiss and quickly signaled for them to be quiet. The reflection spun around, having heard the noise one of them made. Kamal, Ayana, and Binta quickly hid behind a corner, holding their breaths. After a tense moment, the reflection seemed satisfied that nothing was wrong and continued inside. The grandmother whispered urgently, "Come with me, we need to talk somewhere safe." She led them through a side entrance and into the house, with Amina and Idris watching through the mirrors, filled with hope and curiosity. "Where are they going?" Amina whispered to Idris, her heart pounding. "I need to know what they're talking about." Idris watched the scene with intense interest, his gaze particularly focused on the grandmother. "They seem to be heading to the library," he said, a hint of longing in his voice that Amina barely noticed. Once inside the house, the grandmother led Kamal, Ayana, and Binta into the library. She closed the door behind them, ensuring they were alone. "In here, it's safe to talk," she said, her voice steady but filled with urgency. Amina and Idris watched from a mirror in the hallway, unable to see or hear what was happening inside the library. Amina's frustration grew. "I wish I could hear what they're saying. They might have a plan to help me." Idris placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "We have to trust them, Amina. Your grandmother is wise and your friends are loyal. They'll figure something out." Kamal, confused and worried, asked, "What's going on? Why is Amina acting like this?" The grandmother took a deep breath and began to explain. "The Amina you see is not the real Amina. My granddaughter is trapped in the mirror world, and what you see is her reflection, a malevolent entity that has taken her place." Ayana gasped, her eyes wide with shock. "Trapped in the mirror world? How is that possible?" The grandmother nodded, her expression serious. "It's an old curse that has been in our family for generations. The mirror in her room is enchanted, and it has the power to trap a person's soul. Amina's reflection has taken over her life, causing all this chaos." Binta, always the pragmatic one, asked, "How do we get her back?" The grandmother sighed. "Breaking the curse requires Amina to let go of her vanity and focus on the well-being of others, but we need to weaken the reflection's hold on her first. That means supporting Amina in the mirror world and finding a way to communicate with her." Kamal, filled with determination, said, "We will do whatever it takes to bring Amina back. Just tell us what we need to do." The grandmother smiled faintly. "First, We need to find a way to weaken the reflection's power. You must continue to act as if you believe the reflection is Amina, but secretly gather information and stay close. We need to find a moment when the reflection is vulnerable. Ayana nodded, her face set with resolve. We will stay by her side and wait for the right moment. As the conversation continued in the library, Amina sighed in frustration. I hate not knowing what's going on. They could be making a plan right now, and I have no idea what it is. Idris watched the scene intently, his gaze particularly focused on the grandmother. They are smart and loyal. We must trust that they will come up with a good plan. Your grandmother especially seems to know more than she's letting on. Amina glanced at Idris, noticing his intense focus on her grandmother. You seem to know something about her, she said, a hint of curiosity in her voice. Idris quickly looked away, his expression unreadable. I just sensed that she has a strong connection to this mirror and the curse. She might hold the key to breaking it. As Amina and Idris were discussing this, the reflection, growing increasingly paranoid and suspicious, decided to visit the mirror world to confront Amina. The reflection sensed that something was wrong and wanted answers. Suddenly, the reflection appeared in the mirror world, its eyes filled with malice and suspicion. I know your grandmother is helping you, it snarled. She's going to pay. The reflection vanished, leaving Amina filled with worry and dread. Her concern for her grandmother intensified, and as she focused on her fear and love for her grandmother, the mirror world began to change. The oppressive darkness lifted, and she suddenly realized she could interact with the mirrors and that people could see her in them. Amina gasped. Idris, look, I can interact with the mirrors now. Idris turned, astonished. You've done it, Amina. Your concern for others is breaking the curse's hold on you. Amina reached out tentatively, touching the surface of a nearby mirror and watching as it rippled like water. She could see the real world through the mirrors, and when she pressed her hand against the glass, it moved objects on the other side. Let's see if we can use this to our advantage, Idris said, a newfound determination in his voice. We need to find a way to communicate with them. Amina nodded, her heart racing with hope and determination. I won't let the reflection hurt my grandmother. We need to act fast. The night was still as Amina and Idris prepared for what they hoped would be the final confrontation. Amina's newfound ability to interact with the mirrors gave her a glimmer of hope, and she was determined to use this to her advantage. As Kamau, Ayana, and Binta finished their conversation with Amina's grandmother in the library, Amina reached out through the mirror, about to make her presence known. Idris quickly stopped her, noticing the reflection lurking nearby, its eyes filled with suspicion. Don't reveal your ability yet, Idris whispered urgently. If the reflection finds out, it could put your grandmother in even more danger. Amina nodded, reluctantly pulling back. They watched anxiously as Kamau, Ayana, and Binta quietly sneaked out of the house, careful not to attract the reflection's attention. The grandmother lingered behind, ensuring her friends had safely left before stepping out of the library. Just as the grandmother exited the library, she found herself face to face with the reflection. The reflection's eyes narrowed, filled with malice and suspicion. I know you're hiding something, it hissed. What are you plotting? The grandmother maintained her composure, her voice steady. I'm not plotting anything. I'm just an old woman trying to protect my family. The reflection sneered, stepping closer. You think you can outsmart me? I've taken Amina's place, and there's nothing you can do about it. The grandmother met the reflection's gaze, her eyes unwavering. We'll see about that, she said softly, turning and walking away, leaving the reflection seething with anger. Outside, Kamau, Ayana, and Binta regrouped, their minds racing with the information they had just learned. Amina, still watching through the mirrors, knew it was time to reveal herself to each of them individually. Back in the mirror world, Amina turned to Idris, determination in her eyes. I have a plan. I'll speak to each of them individually through the mirrors, revealing what I've learned and guiding them on how to weaken the reflection. Idris nodded, a proud smile on his face. That's a good plan, Amina. Let's get started. Amina focused on Kamal first. She waited until he was alone, then knocked on the mirror in his room. Kamal approached, his eyes widening as he saw Amina's reflection. Amina, he whispered, stepping closer to the mirror. Kamal, it's me, the real me, Amina said urgently. I need you to listen carefully. The reflection suspects something about grandmother, so we can't talk to her too much. But I'm stronger now and can interact with the real world. We need to lure the reflection back to the original mirror where the switch happened. You need to find a way to convince her to move there so I can pull her back in. Kamal nodded, his expression determined. Tell me what to do. Amina explained quickly. You need to act as if nothing is wrong. Continue to follow the reflection and gather information, but don't confront it directly. Look for moments when the reflection is distracted or vulnerable and be ready to act. Kamal agreed, his resolve strengthening. I'll do whatever it takes, Amina. Next, Amina reached out to Ayana. She waited until Ayana was alone, then called to her through the mirror. Ayana, it's Amina, the real Amina, she said softly. Ayana looked up, her eyes filling with tears. Amina, is it really you? Yes, it's me, Amina replied. Listen, we need to work together to weaken the reflection. Here's what you need to do. The reflection suspects grandmother, so we have to avoid drawing too much attention to her. We need to get the reflection back to the original mirror where the switch happened. You need to help create situations that will lead her there. Ayana nodded, understanding the urgency. I'll do my best. Tell me more. Amina carefully explained the plan to Ayana, ensuring she understood her role in the strategy. Ayana was to stay close to the reflection, providing distractions when needed and observing its behavior for any signs of weakness. Finally, Amina reached out to Binta, who was pacing in her room, clearly troubled. Binta, it's Amina, she called through the mirror. I need your help. Binta approached the mirror, her face set with determination. Tell me what to do, Amina. I'm ready. Amina outlined the plan to Binta, instructing her to gather information from the villagers and keep an eye on the reflection's interactions with others. Binta was to subtly spread doubt among the villagers about the reflection's behavior, weakening its influence and helping steer it towards the original mirror. With all three friends now aware of the plan, Amina felt a surge of hope. The coordinated efforts of Kamal, Ayana, and Binta would help create the necessary diversions and weaken the reflection's power. As the plan unfolded, the reflection began spending more time in the market, causing havoc and staying far away from the original mirror. The reflection's erratic behavior and paranoia grew, and it became increasingly suspicious of those around it. The friends knew they had to act quickly. Kamal, Ayana, and Binta came up with a plan to lure the reflection back to the house. They pretended to have a conversation near the market, loud enough for the reflection to overhear. I heard grandmother is planning something big at the house, Kamal said, his voice carrying. Ayana nodded, adding, she said it's the only way to fix everything. The reflection, hearing their conversation, grew even more paranoid and decided to rush back to the house to confront the grandmother. As the reflection hurried away, Kamal, Ayana, and Binta followed closely behind, ready to act. The grandmother, aware of the plan, waited in the hallway near the original mirror. When the reflection burst into the house, the friends quickly surrounded her. What are you planning, old woman? The reflection demanded, advancing on the grandmother. At that moment, Kamal, Ayana, and Binta grabbed the reflection, pulling her towards the original mirror. The reflection struggled, but the combined strength of Amina's friends held her fast. Amina, watching through the mirror, knew this was her chance. She reached out with all her might, using her newfound ability to interact with the real world. As the reflection was pulled closer to the mirror, Amina felt a surge of energy and determination. "Now, Amina," Idris urged, "you can do it." Amina focused all her strength on the mirror, feeling the barrier between the worlds weaken. With a final push, she managed to pull the reflection into the mirror, switching places with her once again. The reflection screamed as it was sucked back into the mirror world, its power finally broken. But the struggle was far from over. As Amina was halfway through the mirror, she put out her hand for Idris. "Come with me," she urged. Idris hesitated for a moment, then grasped her hand. With a combined effort, they both managed to cross the barrier. As soon as Idris stepped into the real world, he looked around in awe. Amina's friends crowded around her, hugging her tightly and expressing their relief and joy at her return. Kamau, Ayana, and Binta were overjoyed, their faces beaming with happiness. The grandmother, however, stood frozen, her eyes wide with shock as she looked at Idris. "It can't be," she whispered, her voice trembling. Idris, standing before her, began to rapidly age. His youthful appearance faded, and his hair turned gray. The realization dawned on everyone as the grandmother rushed forward, tears streaming down her face. "Idris, is it really you?" Idris nodded, his eyes filled with tears. "Yes, it's me." The grandmother embraced him tightly, unable to contain her emotions. "I thought I had lost you forever," she sobbed. Amina and her friends watched in awe and disbelief as the truth unfolded before them. Idris was the grandmother's long-lost husband, trapped in the mirror world for decades. With the reflection defeated and the curse broken, Amina's friends and family began to process the extraordinary events they had just witnessed. Amina, finally free from the mirror's hold, felt a profound sense of relief and gratitude. She looked around at her friends, her grandmother, and Idris, her heart swelling with love and appreciation for their unwavering support. Amina's grandmother, still holding Idris tightly, looked up at Amina with tears of joy in her eyes. "I always hoped you would return, my love," she whispered to Idris. "And now you're here, thanks to Amina and her friends." Idris, now fully aged, smiled warmly. "I owe my freedom to you all. The strength and unity you showed are what broke the curse." Amina stepped forward, embracing her grandmother and Idris. "I'm so glad you're both here. I promise to always remember the lessons I've learned through this ordeal." Kamau, Ayana, and Binta joined the embrace, their faces glowing with happiness and relief. Kamau spoke up, his voice filled with emotion. "We couldn't have done it without each other. Our unity is what saved Amina and brought Idris back." Ayana nodded, her eyes shining with tears. "This experience has taught us the true meaning of friendship and loyalty. We need to cherish and protect one another." Binta, always the pragmatic one, added, "And it showed us the dangers of vanity and self-absorption." Amina, your journey has been a lesson for all of us. The following days were filled with celebrations and gratitude. The villagers, once suspicious of Amina's behavior, now understood the truth and welcomed her back with open arms. They admired the bravery and unity displayed by Amina and her friends. The story of their triumph over the cursed mirror became a cherished lesson in the community. Amina embraced her new perspective on life, dedicating herself to helping others and fostering unity and love within the village. She worked alongside her friends and family to ensure that no one would ever fall victim to vanity and self-absorption again. The entire village learned the importance of humility and caring for one another. The curse had shown them that true beauty came from within and that focusing on appearances could lead to disaster. As the sun set over the village, casting a warm golden glow, Amina stood by the river, watching her reflection in the water. This time, she saw not just her own face, but the faces of her friends and family, all united in love and support. She smiled, knowing that she was truly blessed. With a heart full of gratitude and a renewed sense of purpose, Amina walked back to her home, ready to embrace whatever the future held. She knew that as long as they stood together, they could overcome any challenge that came their way. And so, the village thrived, bound together by the lessons learned from Amina's journey. The story of the cursed mirror became a symbol of hope and unity, a reminder that true strength lies in the bonds we share with those we love. But as Amina and her friends celebrated their victory, a shadow flickered in a nearby mirror. The reflection, its eyes filled with malevolent intent, watched from the other side, biding its time and waiting for another chance to strike. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more African folklore stories.